Ethan Caldwell stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, gazing over the glittering skyline of Manhattan. The city, a pulsating entity of light and ambition, mirrored the life he had built, grand, unstoppable, and seemingly perfect. Below him, the streets buzzed with movement, luxury cars sliding through avenues lined with designer boutiques and exclusive restaurants, places where his name carried weight, where doors opened before he even had to knock. Yet, even amid the grandeur, something felt hollow. He swirled the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler, its smooth richness failing to soothe the unease sitting heavy in his chest. In less than a week, he would stand before hundreds of high-profile guests, exchanging vows with Veronica Hastings, the poised, sophisticated daughter of one of the nation's most powerful political figures. It was the ultimate match, a union of influence and legacy. The press had already dubbed it the wedding of the year, speculating about every detail, from the imported floral arrangements to the designer of Veronica's gown. It should have been perfect. It should have been everything he had worked for. And yet, as he stood there, alone in the sprawling silence of his penthouse, an unwelcome thought crept into his mind. Why doesn't it feel like enough? Ethan had built an empire from nothing. He had clawed his way from a childhood of struggle, where he watched his single mother work double shifts to keep food on the table. He had vowed never to live like that again, to build a life of power, one where he controlled the narrative. And he had succeeded. With relentless ambition, he transformed his college startup into Caldwell Innovations, a billion-dollar tech conglomerate that shaped the way people lived, worked, and communicated. People admired him, feared him, respected him, but did anyone truly know him? His phone buzzed on the sleek marble countertop. He glanced at the screen. Daniel Prescott. Ethan exhaled sharply before answering. Dan, tell me you're actually getting some sleep before the biggest day of your life. Ethan chuckled dryly. Since when do I sleep? Daniel, his best friend and business partner, sighed. Since never. But seriously, man, I know you. You're not excited. Ethan stiffened. That's ridiculous. Is it? Daniel pressed. You've got the world at your feet, but I've never seen you look more... He hesitated before finishing. Disconnected. Ethan didn't answer. How could he explain what he didn't fully understand himself? That despite standing at the pinnacle of success, something fundamental was missing. That at night, when the city hushed and all he had left was silence, an old ghost whispered through his thoughts, a voice he had long since buried, a voice that once belonged to Sophia Carter. His chest tightened at the memory. He had moved past that chapter. He had made his choice, and there was no point lingering on a woman who had no place in his future. You're overthinking again. Daniel's voice cut through his thoughts. Ethan shook his head, forcing himself back to the present. I'm just focused on the wedding. Veronica and I are making history. Daniel was quiet for a moment. If you say so. A knock at the penthouse door saved him from responding. I have to go, Ethan said, hanging up before Daniel could push further. He strode across the polished wood floors, swinging open the door to reveal Veronica, standing in a crimson designer dress, her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. Ethan, she greeted, stepping inside as though she already owned the space. You didn't call me back. He kissed her lightly on the cheek, ignoring the flicker of annoyance that crossed her expression. Busy day. They're all busy days. She studied him for a beat. Are you ready for the weekend? Of course. Her lips curved, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Good. Because my father has arranged for a sit-down with the press before the ceremony. We need to ensure the narrative remains pristine. Ethan clenched his jaw. He understood the game. Veronica's father, Senator Hastings, was as much invested in this marriage as she was, maybe more. Their union was an alignment of power, a carefully curated partnership that held mutual benefits. But was it love? He pushed the thought aside. Love wasn't necessary. Love was a distraction, a weakness. It was what had nearly derailed his path years ago. He walked to the bar and poured himself another drink. "It'll be fine, Veronica." She smiled, but something in her gaze lingered, as if searching for cracks in the flawless exterior he had spent years perfecting. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan wondered if she saw the truth. Because behind the power, behind the prestige, behind the carefully constructed illusion of a man who had it all, he had never felt more alone. Sophia Carter balanced a paintbrush between her fingers, staring at the half-finished canvas before her. The soft glow of Charleston's afternoon sun spilled through the wide windows of her art studio, illuminating the muted colors she had been working into the piece. But her mind was elsewhere. The wedding invitation sat on her work table, its gold-trimmed lettering taunting her with memories she had spent years trying to bury. Ethan Caldwell and Veronica Hastings. The names looked perfect together, printed in elegant script on thick, cream-colored cardstock. A match made in power and prestige. Sophia let out a slow breath, forcing herself to pick up the invitation again. The weight of it in her hands felt heavier than it should. She hadn't seen Ethan in 6 years, not since he had chosen his company, his ambition, over their love. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the embossed details. She had spent the last few years building a life far away from Ethan's world, pouring herself into her art, raising her children, and ensuring they never felt the absence of the man who had once been everything to her. The triplets giggled from the next room, their laughter cutting through her thoughts. She smiled despite the ache in her chest. Ethan Jr., Ava, and Theo, her entire world. The pieces of him she had never intended to keep secret, but had also never had the opportunity to share. She had known Ethan's hunger for success would always come first. That had been clear the day he had walked away. And yet, he had sent her this invitation. A cruel gesture, a careless mistake, or something else entirely. Sophia's sister, Miriam, entered the studio, taking one look at the invitation and rolling her eyes. "Please tell me you're not actually thinking of going." Sophia exhaled sharply. "I don't know." Miriam crossed her arms. "What do you mean you don't know? That man broke you, Sophia. And now he wants to show off his perfect little life in front of you?" Sophia ran a hand through her hair. "Maybe it's time he sees what he left behind." Miriam's brow furrowed. "You mean—" Sophia lifted her chin. "I mean, I'm not going alone." For the first time in years, she would face Ethan. And this time, he wouldn't be the one holding all the power. Sophia lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan above her. Sleep eluded her, tangled in the thoughts that had surfaced the moment she opened that wedding invitation. The past had come rushing back like a tidal wave, threatening to pull her under. The invitation still sat on her nightstand, its gold-trimmed edges catching the dim light. The elegant calligraphy spelling out Ethan Caldwell's name was a cruel reminder of everything she had lost, and everything she had built since then. 6 years had passed. 6 long, transformative years in which she had become more than just Ethan Caldwell's ex. She had become a mother, an artist, a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of their shattered love. A soft murmur from the adjacent room pulled her from her thoughts. Carefully, she rose from the bed and padded down the hallway, her heart softening at the sight of her triplets, curled up together on their shared bed. Ethan Jr., Ava, and Theo, her beautiful, mischievous, unbreakable children. She crouched beside them, brushing a gentle hand over Ethan Jr.'s forehead. He had his father's strong jawline, All three of them carried echoes of Ethan in their features, a fact that never failed to twist something deep in her chest. Miriam's voice rang in her head. "You don't have to go. You don't owe him anything." Maybe she didn't, but her children did. The next morning, Sophia sat at the kitchen table, the invitation still in her hands, tracing the embossed lettering with her fingertips. Across from her, Miriam stirred her coffee with a look of disapproval. "So, you're really going?" Sophia exhaled slowly. "Yes." Miriam set her mug down with a thud. "Sophia, I love you, but why? Why walk back into his world? He left you. He left them. He doesn't deserve this." Sophia met her sister's gaze, unwavering. "He doesn't deserve it. But my kids do." Miriam leaned back, arms crossed. "And what happens when he pretends they don't exist? What if he laughs it off, or, worse, claims they aren't his?" Sophia's stomach clenched at the thought, but she forced herself to push through it. "Then at least I'll know. And so will they. I've spent years making excuses for why their father isn't in their lives. They deserve the truth, even if it hurts." Miriam's expression softened. "And what about you?" Sophia swallowed hard. "I'll survive. I always do." Later that day, she stood in front of her closet, carefully selecting an outfit for the wedding. She refused to look weak, but she also had no intention of dressing to impress Ethan. She chose a sleek navy dress, elegant, understated, but commanding. A reminder that she was no longer the heartbroken girl he had left behind. As she packed their bags, the reality of what she was about to do settled over her. She was willingly stepping back into a world she had once escaped from, a world of wealth, power, and ruthless ambition. A world where Ethan Caldwell thrived. Her children played in the living room, blissfully unaware of the weight of this trip. To them, it was an exciting adventure, a chance to see something new. They didn't know that the man they were about to meet had once been the love of her life. The drive to New York felt endless, each mile stretching out with unspoken anxieties. As the city skyline loomed ahead, memories crashed over her like waves. The first time she had visited Manhattan with Ethan, standing on the rooftop of his tiny apartment, dreaming of their future together. The nights she had spent waiting up for him as his company took off, convincing herself that his ambition wouldn't destroy them. But it had. And now here she was, returning, not as the woman he had left, but as the woman he had no idea existed. When she pulled up to the lavish estate where the wedding was being held, a uniformed valet opened her door. She took a deep breath and stepped out, smoothing down her dress as she turned to the back seat. "Okay, my loves," she said gently. "Are you ready?" The triplets grinned, their wide, eager eyes mirroring Ethan's in a way that made her breath hitch. She took each of their hands, steadying herself. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about showing him that no matter how much wealth and power he had gained, he had lost something far greater, and tonight, he would finally see it. The Caldwell estate was everything Sophia expected, grand, extravagant, and meticulously curated to impress. The sprawling mansion sat atop acres of manicured gardens, its towering columns and pristine stone facade exuding power and prestige. Twinkling lights wrapped around ancient oak trees, casting a golden glow over the grounds, as luxury cars rolled in one after another, delivering the elite of high society to what was supposed to be the wedding of the year. Sophia stepped out of the car, her breath steady, her posture composed. The late summer breeze lifted the hem of her dress, and for a fleeting second she imagined herself years ago, young, naive, stepping into Ethan's world with nothing but love and faith in him. Not this time. She turned, helping Ethan Jr., Ava, and Theo out of the car. The children's eyes widened as they took in the spectacle around them. The glowing chandeliers, The elegant guests stepping onto the cobblestone walkway, the sheer magnificence of a world they had never known. A valet approached her. "Miss, would you like assistance with—" "No, thank you," she said firmly, gripping her children's hands as they moved forward. Heads turned the moment she stepped onto the path leading to the grand entrance. Whispers flitted through the crowd like ripples in a pond. She could feel the weight of their curiosity, the silent questions hanging in the air. Who is she? Why is she here? And those children? Sophia walked with quiet confidence, ignoring the stares. She wasn't here to create a scene. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for the truth. Inside, the estate was even more breathtaking. A grand ballroom stretched before her, gleaming with marble floors, gilded mirrors, and crystal chandeliers that caught the light like diamonds. A live orchestra played softly in the background, setting the tone for an evening of luxury and celebration. Waiters in crisp black suits glided through the room carrying trays of champagne, offering glasses to well-dressed guests who barely noticed them. The air smelled of fresh roses, expensive perfume, and a hint of power. Ethan's world. And then she saw him. Ethan stood near the far end of the ballroom, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He was engaged in conversation with an older man, likely an investor or politician, his expression sharp, composed, every movement calculated. He was the epitome of success, the man she had once loved and lost. But he didn't see her. Not yet. Theo tugged at her hand. "Mommy, is this a castle?" Sophia smiled down at him, squeezing his tiny fingers. "No, sweetheart, just a very big house." "Do kings live here?" Ava asked, her curious blue eyes darting around the room. She glanced back at Ethan. "Some people think they do." Miriam had warned her about this moment, about how unprepared she might feel when she finally stood in front of Ethan again. But nothing could have prepared her for the way her heart clenched when his gaze finally lifted and locked onto hers. Time stilled. The murmur of conversation around them faded into a dull hum. Ethan's expression didn't change at first, as though his mind couldn't fully process what he was seeing. And then, in a fraction of a second, his entire demeanor shifted. His jaw tightened, his brows furrowed. A flicker of shock crossed his face before he masked it behind a stoic, unreadable expression. His eyes moved from Sophia to the children. Sophia's heart pounded. She saw the way his gaze flickered over Ethan Jr., then Ava, then Theo. The resemblance was undeniable. Ethan Caldwell, the man who had built an empire from nothing, stood frozen in place. And just like that, his perfectly curated world cracked. The conversation he had been engaged in was long forgotten. The older man beside him followed his gaze toward Sophia and the children, then muttered something before slipping away, sensing the tension in the air. Ethan took a step forward, slow and measured. The control he so meticulously maintained was slipping. She could see it in the way his hands clenched at his sides, the way his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Sophia didn't move. She let him come to her. Let him take in the reality he had unknowingly avoided for 6 years. When he finally reached her, the air between them was electric, thick with unspoken words. "Sophia," he said, his voice lower than she remembered, rougher. "Ethan." His gaze flickered back to the children. "Are they—" "Yes." The word was simple, final. It was the truth he had never sought, the reality he had never imagined. His breath came out uneven. He looked back at them, really looked at them this time. Ethan Jr. standing tall, studying him with quiet curiosity. Ava, with her soft curls and watchful blue eyes, shifting closer to Sophia. And Theo still clutching his mother's hand, blinking up at the man in front of him. Ethan inhaled sharply, his grip tightening at his sides. He turned back to Sophia, and for the first time, the billionaire who commanded boardrooms, who closed multi-million-dollar deals with ease, who had everything he had ever wanted, looked lost. She had come here for the truth, and now she had given it to him. What he did with it, that was entirely up to him. Silence stretched between them like an unspoken challenge. Ethan's gaze flickered between Sophia and the 3 children who stood at her side, his children. The weight of the realization settled heavily on his chest, pressing against the carefully controlled exterior he had spent years perfecting. "Sophia," he said again, his voice quieter this time, almost hesitant. How is this possible?" Sophia tilted her chin, her expression unreadable. "You tell me, Ethan. You were the one who walked away." A murmur rippled through the surrounding guests, who had now begun whispering behind their champagne flutes. Ethan could feel their stares, their curiosity slicing through the air like knives. He had spent years crafting his image, one of power, prestige, and an unshakable presence. And yet, here he was, standing before the only woman who had ever truly known him, utterly speechless. Veronica appeared at his side, her perfectly composed face now clouded with confusion. "Ethan?" Her voice was sharp, demanding. "What is this?" Ethan barely heard her. His entire focus remained on the children, on their eyes, their expressions, the uncanny resemblance to himself. His world had been thrown off its axis, and he couldn't find the words to steady it. "Are you going to say something?" Sophia asked, her voice quieter now but no less resolute. "Or are you just going to stand there?" Ethan swallowed hard. I need to talk to you. Privately." Sophia arched a brow. "Now you want to talk?" His jaw clenched. "Please." She considered him for a moment before finally nodding. "Fine." Without another word, she turned and walked toward one of the grand corridors leading off the ballroom. The triplets hesitated, their small hands gripping hers tightly. "It's okay," she reassured them. "Stay with Aunt Miriam. I'll be right back." Miriam, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward and took the children's hands, her expression protective. "You sure about this?" she murmured. Sophia gave her a firm nod before disappearing into the corridor, Ethan following closely behind. The moment they stepped into the private study, away from the curious eyes of the guests, Ethan exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. The weight of the situation finally hit him in full force. "You should sit down," Sophia said, crossing her arms. "You look like you're about to pass out." Ethan ignored the remark, his gaze locked onto hers. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you mean after you told me that nothing, not love, not family, would ever be more important than your company?" His chest tightened. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" she challenged. "You made your choice, Ethan. You left. You decided that wealth and ambition were more important than what we had. And I wasn't going to beg you to stay." Ethan ran a hand down his face, exhaling slowly. "I never knew, Sophia. If I had—" "You wouldn't have done anything differently," she cut in, her voice steady. "Because back then, you weren't capable of putting anyone before yourself." Her words stung because, deep down, he knew they were true. For years, he had convinced himself that he had made the right decision. That love was a distraction, that emotions had no place in the world of business. And yet, standing here now, staring at the woman he had once loved and the 3 children he had unknowingly abandoned, he felt like the biggest fool in the world. Sophia sighed, rubbing her temples. "Look, I didn't come here to ruin your wedding. I came because I thought it was time you knew." His head snapped up. "So you weren't going to tell me? Ever?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe not." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not your decision to make." She let out a humorless laugh. And yet you had no problem making the decision to leave me behind. Forgive me if I wasn't eager to track you down and beg for your attention." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. The realization of what he had missed hit him like a sledgehammer. 5 years. 5 entire years of their lives. First words, first steps, birthdays, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. Gone. Moments he would never get back. "I need time," he finally admitted, his voice raw. "I don't even know where to begin." Sophia studied him for a long moment. "Well, that's the difference between us, Ethan. I didn't have the luxury of time. I had to figure it out the moment I saw those 2 pink lines." Her words were a slap to the face, but he had no defense. After a long silence, she sighed. "Look, I'm not asking for anything. Not your money, not your pity. I've taken care of them just fine without you." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "They're my children too, Sophia." She tilted her head. "Are they?" "Because so far all I see is a man who's in shock, not a father." That hit even harder. Ethan exhaled sharply, pressing his fingers against his temples. He had walked into this night expecting to solidify his future. Instead, his past had crashed through the walls he had built, leaving nothing but chaos in its wake. Sophia turned toward the door, pausing just before leaving. "For what it's worth, Ethan, they're great kids. Strong, smart, kind." She hesitated before adding, "Everything I once thought you could be." Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone in the room with nothing but the echoes of a life he had never known he lost. For the first time in years, Ethan Caldwell didn't feel like a billionaire. He just felt empty. Ethan stood in the empty study, his mind a whirlwind of emotions he had never allowed himself to feel. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the distant murmur of wedding guests beyond the grand doors. His hands trembled as he loosened the stiff collar of his tuxedo. He felt exposed, vulnerable, 2 things he had sworn he'd never be again. He needed air. Stepping out onto the balcony that overlooked the lavish gardens of the estate, he inhaled deeply, the crisp night air doing little to clear his thoughts. His wedding, his meticulously planned high-profile wedding, had just been overshadowed by a truth he had never even considered possible. He had children, 3 of them, and he had missed everything. His grip tightened on the balcony railing. How had this happened? How had she, Sophia, been able to carry on without him, raise their children without a word? Anger flickered beneath his skin, not at her but at himself. Had he truly been so blind, so consumed with his empire, that he hadn't even thought to look back? "Ethan." He turned sharply at the sound of Veronica's voice. His fiancée stood in the doorway, her arms folded over her chest, her expression a mixture of confusion and fury. The sharp angles of her face, usually poised in a perfect display of control, were now marred with barely concealed rage. "What the hell was that?" she demanded, stepping toward him. "Who are they?" Ethan sighed, dragging a hand down his face. He didn't have the answers she wanted. Hell, he didn't even have them for himself. "They're mine," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "My children." Veronica's mouth fell open for a brief moment before she let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You have to be joking." He met her gaze, his expression grim. "I wish I were." She stared at him, stunned, before shaking her head. "You knew. You had to have known," she accused. "There's no way something like this just happens." Ethan clenched his jaw. "I didn't. I swear to you, Veronica, I had no idea." Veronica exhaled sharply, pacing away from him. "This was supposed to be our night. Our future." She turned back to him, her voice tight with barely contained rage. "And instead, I find out that you have 3 children from some woman you never even mentioned?" His patience thinned. "She isn't just some woman," he snapped. "She was—" He stopped himself before he could finish the thought. She was everything. Veronica's eyes narrowed. That's it, isn't it? You still have feelings for her? Ethan didn't answer. That was enough. Veronica let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. I should have seen it. The way you hesitated every time we talked about kids, the way you always kept your past so damn locked up. And now, here we are. She gestured toward the ballroom, where guests were undoubtedly still whispering about the scandal unfolding. Ethan raked a hand through his hair. I need time to figure this out. Her expression turned icy. Time? Are you kidding me? This isn't just some inconvenience, Ethan. This is a disaster. My father... She stopped, inhaling sharply. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? My family? Ethan's stomach churned. Veronica, this isn't about your reputation. She scoffed. That's exactly what this is about. You and I, we were supposed to be the perfect couple. The future power duo. And now you're suddenly a father to 3 kids you didn't even know existed? She took a step back, shaking her head. I won't be part of this circus. The cold finality in her voice settled deep into Ethan's bones. He knew what she was saying before she even said it. This wedding is over, Veronica said, her voice eerily calm now. And so are we. He didn't argue. She turned on her heel, striding away with the precision of a woman who refused to be anything less than flawless, even in heartbreak. Ethan exhaled heavily, pressing his hands against the balcony railing as the weight of it all crushed him. He had lost Veronica. But had he ever really had her? Ethan re-entered the mansion, his mind still reeling. Guests whispered behind their hands, trying and failing to be discreet. He ignored them, his only focus now on one thing. Sophia. He found her near the grand staircase, speaking quietly with Miriam as the triplets clung to her legs. The sight hit him harder than he expected. They belonged with her, no doubt about it. They looked up at her with trust, with love. And he wasn't a part of that world. Not yet. Taking a steadying breath, he approached. Sophia. She turned, her expression unreadable. Miriam's gaze, however, was sharp with suspicion. What do you want, Ethan? Sophia asked quietly. I need to talk to you, he said. Just you. Miriam tensed, ready to intervene, but Sophia nodded, surprising them both. Okay. Ethan led her into a quieter part of the mansion, somewhere away from prying eyes. He turned to her, running a hand through his hair before finally speaking. I lost Veronica, he admitted. Sophia raised an eyebrow. That was fast. He let out a humorless chuckle. Turns out she didn't like surprises. Sophia crossed her arms. And what about you, Ethan? Do you? He met her gaze, the weight of his choices pressing against him. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. But I do know one thing, I can't just walk away from this. Sophia exhaled slowly. You don't get to pick and choose when you want to be a father. You either are, or you aren't. Ethan nodded. Then let me prove that I can be. Sophia studied him for a long moment before sighing. You want to be in their lives, Ethan? Fine. But I'm not going to make this easy for you, and I won't let you hurt them. He swallowed hard, nodding. I wouldn't expect anything less. The challenge had been set, and for the first time in years, Ethan Caldwell wasn't focused on a business deal or a corporate conquest. He was focused on something far more important. His family. Ethan sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The mansion was behind him, but the chaos of the evening lingered like an echo in his mind. He had walked away from his wedding, from the life he had meticulously constructed, only to find himself at a crossroads he never anticipated. He had lost control. For years, Ethan had defined himself by his discipline, his ability to plan every move with precision. And yet tonight, everything had unraveled. The image he had built of himself as a self-made man, invulnerable to the distractions of love and family, was a lie. Because no amount of money or success could change the truth staring him in the face. He had children, and he had missed 5 years of their lives. He rubbed his temple, exhaling slowly. He needed to see them again, needed to process the reality that Sophia had carried and raised their children without him. The weight of it was suffocating, pressing down on his chest like a lead anchor. Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan reached for his phone and dialed Daniel Prescott. His best friend picked up on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call." Ethan let out a bitter chuckle. "How bad is it?" Daniel sighed. "The press is eating this up. Veronica's already spinning the story, making herself out to be the betrayed fiancé. Your investors are nervous and your PR team is practically in cardiac arrest." Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. "And Sophia?" A pause. "She left with the kids. I don't think she wanted to be around for the aftermath." Ethan stared at the darkened street ahead. "I need to see her." Daniel hesitated. "Ethan, don't do this if you're not sure." "I am sure." The words left his mouth before he could second-guess them. "I need to make this right." Daniel sighed again. "Then you'd better start by apologizing. Not just to her, but to those kids. You can't undo the past, but you can decide what kind of father you're going to be now." Ethan didn't respond. He didn't have an answer for that yet. By the time Ethan pulled up outside the modest brownstone in Brooklyn, the lights inside were dim. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the door handle. What if she refused to see him? What if she had already made up her mind that he was unfit to be part of their lives? He stepped out of the car anyway. The knock on the door was soft, hesitant, so unlike the confident, commanding presence he carried in the boardroom. A long pause followed before the door cracked open, revealing Miriam's sharp gaze. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she said, arms crossed over her chest. "I need to see them," Ethan said, his voice quiet but firm. Miriam scoffed. "And why should I let you?" "Because I lost enough time already." Another pause. Then, after a heavy sigh, she stepped back. "She's in the living room. But if you upset her or those kids, I swear—" "I know." Ethan nodded. "I won't." As he stepped inside, his eyes landed on Sophia, curled up on the couch with Ava on her lap, Ethan Jr. and Theo tucked against her sides. The sight hit him like a punch to the gut. They were so small, so trusting, leaning into their mother as if she were the center of their universe. She was their universe. Sophia looked up, surprise flickering across her face before it hardened into wariness. "Ethan." His throat tightened. "Sophia, I needed to see you." She exhaled, gently shifting Ava so she could sit up. "I don't know what you expect from this." "I don't either." He stepped closer, his gaze dropping to the children. "But I know I can't just walk away." Ethan Jr. looked at him with curiosity, his small brow furrowing. "Are you really our daddy?" The question knocked the breath out of him. He crouched to their level, his hands resting on his knees. "Yes, I am." Theo tilted his head. "Then where have you been?" Ethan swallowed hard. The honesty of children was merciless. He had no good answer for them, no excuse that would erase the years he had lost. "I didn't know," he admitted. "I should have. But I didn't." Ava yawned sleepily. "Are you staying?" Ethan's heart clenched. He looked up at Sophia, searching for any indication of what she wanted him to say. She met his gaze with quiet resolve. "That depends on you, Ethan." He nodded slowly. "I want to, if you'll let me." Sophia sighed, rubbing her temple. "I don't know what this is supposed to look like. You can't just walk in and play dad when it's convenient." "I know," Ethan said. "That's not what I want." She studied him for a long moment. "Then prove it." Ethan nodded, rising to his feet. "I will." For the first time in his life, he had no plan, no strategy, no guarantee of success. But as he looked down at his children, the three pieces of himself he never knew existed, he knew he had something worth fighting for. And this time, he wouldn't walk away. Ethan woke up in his penthouse the next morning, feeling an unfamiliar heaviness in his chest. The city skyline stretched before him, as breathtaking as ever, but today it felt distant, cold even. The life he had built so carefully over the years, the empire that once defined him, suddenly seemed hollow in the face of what he had learned. He had 3 children, 3 beautiful, curious children who barely knew him, and a woman who had once been his entire world, but now barely trusted him. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. He expected it to be Daniel or his PR team demanding damage control. Instead, it was a message from Sophia. "Sophia, if you're serious about being in their lives, meet us at the park today, 11 a.m. Don't be late." Ethan let out a slow breath, his grip tightening around the phone. She was giving him a chance, however small, to prove himself. He wasn't going to waste it. By the time Ethan pulled up to the park in Brooklyn, nerves twisted in his stomach. An unfamiliar sensation for a man who had faced billion-dollar deals without flinching. But this wasn't a business transaction. This was real. This was his family. He spotted them near the playground. Sophia sat on a park bench, watching as the triplets played in the sand. The sight sent a sharp pang through his chest. She looked so natural, so at ease, the sunlight catching in her hair as she laughed at something Ava said. For a moment he hesitated. Could he do this? Could he be the father they deserved? Then Ethan Jr. turned and spotted him. His small face scrunched in confusion before lighting up with curiosity. "Mommy, he came." Sophia looked up, her expression guarded as Ethan approached. "I said not to be late," she said, glancing at her watch. Ethan smirked. "It's 10:58. She shook her head, but he swore he saw the faintest hint of amusement in her eyes. The triplets ran toward him, stopping just a few feet away. They stared up at him, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and intrigue. Theo was the first to speak. "Are you going to play with us?" Ethan hesitated. Sure." Ava grabbed his hand without warning and started pulling him toward the playground. "Then come on. We're making a castle." Ethan glanced back at Sophia, who watched him with arms crossed, clearly waiting to see if he would actually follow through. He did. For the next hour, Ethan sat in the sand, helping his children build what could only be described as the most structurally unsound castle in existence. He had never done anything like this before. His childhood had been filled with struggles, not playdates, but for the first time in years, he let himself relax. He let Ava pile sand on his shoes. He let Theo declare himself king of the castle and demand everyone bow before him. He let Ethan Jr. explain, in serious detail, why their castle needed a moat to keep bad guys out. And for the first time, they laughed with him. Not at him, not because of his wealth or his status, just because he was there. Sophia watched from the bench, something unreadable flickering across her face. He knew she was analyzing every move he made, waiting for him to falter, to run back to his high-rise office and leave them behind again. But he wasn't going anywhere. After a while, Sophia walked over, standing beside him as the kids played a few feet away. "They like you," she admitted, surprising him. Ethan glanced at her. "I like them too." She sighed, crossing her arms. "This doesn't mean I trust you yet. Showing up once isn't enough." "I know," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to just let me in overnight." Sophia studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then don't disappoint them, Ethan, because if you do, you don't get another chance. He met her gaze, determination settling deep in his chest. I won't. For the first time in his life, Ethan Caldwell wasn't chasing wealth, power, or success. He was chasing something far more important, his family. Ethan had expected that one afternoon in the park would be enough to break the ice, but he quickly learned that fatherhood wasn't a business deal. There was no instant gratification, no immediate results. It was a long game, one that required patience, effort, and consistency. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't calling the shots. Sophia had made it clear, if he wanted to be in their lives, he had to prove it, not to her, but to them. So, he did what he did best. He strategized. Over the next few weeks, Ethan made himself present. He showed up at their preschool for drop-offs and pickups, despite the fact that he had never driven himself anywhere in years. He sat with them at the kitchen table in Sophia's brownstone, watching as they colored pictures and bickered over who got the blue crayon. It was awkward at first. The triplets weren't sure what to make of him. Ava asked too many questions. Theo was suspicious of his every move, and Ethan Jr. watched him with quiet curiosity, trying to figure out what kind of man he really was. And Sophia? She kept her distance, arms crossed, waiting for him to mess up. The old Ethan would have walked away from this kind of uncertainty. But this Ethan, this father, knew that nothing worth having came easily. One evening, Ethan showed up unannounced. It had been a long day at the office, and he was exhausted, but something inside him told him he needed to be here. Sophia opened the door, surprised. "You didn't call." "I know," he admitted, "but I wanted to see them." She hesitated, then stepped aside, letting him in. The triplets were on the couch watching a cartoon. When they saw him, Ava grinned. "You're back." Ethan knelt beside her. "I told you I would be." She tilted her head. "Do you want to watch with us?" He had never watched an animated movie in his life, but when she patted the spot beside her, he sat down without hesitation. Sophia lingered in the doorway, watching. Something in her expression softened. Days turned into weeks. Ethan's presence became expected. He took them to the park, helped Sophia with bedtime routines, and even learned how to make grilled cheese sandwiches the way the kids liked. It wasn't perfect. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And slowly, Sophia was starting to see it. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Sophia stepped onto the porch where Ethan stood, watching the city lights. "You're still here," she said, crossing her arms. He glanced at her. "Did you think I wouldn't be?" She sighed. "I don't know, Ethan. This isn't the life you planned for." He looked at her, his voice steady. "Maybe it's the life I should have planned for." Sophia studied him for a long moment. "You're different." He smirked. "You make it sound like a bad thing." She shook her head. "It's just unexpected." Ethan turned to her fully, stepping closer. "I made a mistake, Sophia, a huge one. But I'm here now, and I don't want to waste another second." For the first time since she had walked back into his life, she didn't have a comeback. She just looked at him, as if searching for something she wasn't ready to admit. And for the first time, Ethan felt like he might finally have a chance. Ethan had started to believe he was making progress. He had built a fragile rhythm with the triplets, their hesitations slowly giving way to small moments of trust. Sophia, too, seemed less wary, though her walls were still standing, a silent warning that he wasn't completely forgiven. But progress didn't mean perfection, and one mistake was all it took to remind him just how much he still had to prove. It was a Wednesday evening, and Ethan had promised the triplets he would take them to the zoo after preschool. He had cleared his schedule, rearranged meetings, and even ignored a call from his board of directors. Nothing mattered more than this. But then, a last-minute crisis at Caldwell Innovations arose, one that demanded his attention. His company was in the middle of a major acquisition, and the deal was at risk of falling through. His advisors begged him to step in. 1 hour, he told himself. Just 1 hour. Except it wasn't. By the time he arrived at Sophia's brownstone, the triplets were on the front steps, their little faces crumpled in disappointment. Sophia stood behind them, arms crossed, expression unreadable but unmistakably tense. Ava was the first to speak. "You didn't come." Theo scowled. "We waited." Ethan Jr. said nothing, but the way he avoided looking at him spoke louder than words. Guilt hit him like a freight train. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "Something came up at work." Sophia let out a slow breath, shaking her head. "Of course it did. I tried to—" She held up a hand. "Ethan, stop. This isn't about excuses. You promised them." Ava's lip trembled. "You said you'd be there." Ethan crouched down, desperate to fix the damage. "I know, sweetheart, and I hate that I wasn't. But I promise I'll make it up to you." Theo folded his arms. That's what people say when they don't mean it. Ethan reeled at the accusation. He had said those very words once, to employees, to investors, but never had they carried the weight they did now. Sophia exhaled sharply. "Ethan, I warned you. They've been through enough. They don't need a father who's here 1 second and gone the next." Panic gripped him. "That's not who I am." Sophia's eyes flashed. "It's exactly who you used to be." Her words stung because they carried truth. And that truth was cutting through him, reminding him that he had spent years prioritizing his empire over everything else. But this wasn't a business deal. This was his family. Ethan stayed on the front steps long after Sophia had ushered the triplets inside. He felt the weight of their disappointment, the sting of their mistrust, the fear that he had just undone weeks of progress. He needed to do better. He needed to be better. Later that night he sat in his penthouse, staring at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled out before him, glittering and vast, a kingdom he had built with his own hands. And yet, for the first time, it didn't feel like enough. His phone buzzed. "Daniel." "You look like hell." His friend's voice came through the line. "What happened?" "I let them down." Daniel was silent for a moment before saying, "Then don't do it again." Ethan clenched his jaw. "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is." Daniel sighed. "Look, Ethan, I've known you a long time, and I've seen you fight tooth and nail for things far less important than this. You want to be in their lives? Then be in their lives. Not when it's convenient, not when your schedule allows, but always." Ethan let the words sink in. He had spent years making choices that served only himself. That had to change. The next morning, Ethan showed up at Sophia's doorstep, coffee in one hand, a small bag of pastries in the other. Sophia opened the door, raising an eyebrow. "Bribery?" He exhaled. "A peace offering." She hesitated before stepping aside, allowing him in. The triplets were at the kitchen table, eating breakfast. When they saw him, their expressions remained cautious. Ethan placed the pastries on the table, then knelt beside them. "I messed up yesterday." Ava poked at her cereal. "Yeah, you did." Theo grumbled. "We were mad." Ethan nodded. "You had every right to be, and I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough, but I want to prove to you that I'll do better." Ethan Jr. studied him. "How?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. "Because I canceled every single one of my meetings today, and if you're willing to give me another chance, I'd like to take you somewhere special." Ava's eyes widened. "Really?" Theo narrowed his. "No meetings at all?" Not one, Ethan confirmed. Today is about you. The triplets exchanged glances, their silent communication unfolding in a way only siblings understood. Then slowly, Ethan Jr. nodded. Okay. Sophia, who had been watching quietly, leaned against the counter. You better not screw this up, Caldwell. Ethan met her gaze. I won't. He meant it. And this time, he would prove it. Ethan had thought proving himself would be simple. Show up, be present, and everything would fall into place. But reality was proving much harsher than his expectations. Despite his attempts, the wounds of abandonment didn't heal overnight. The triplets, though warming to him, still hesitated in moments when he reached out. Ethan Jr. observed him closely, as if waiting for another broken promise. Theo tested him, pushing limits just to see if he'd give up. And Ava, the most trusting of the three, still held back when it came to calling him Daddy. Sophia, too, remained guarded. She acknowledged his efforts, but every step forward was met with a reminder. Don't make promises you can't keep. Ethan knew he had to do more than just show up. He had to change. Determined, Ethan planned something special for the kids. A weekend getaway to a cabin outside the city, away from the distractions of work and wealth. Just them, together, with no interruptions. When he proposed the idea to Sophia, she raised an eyebrow. A weekend? Alone with them? Ethan nodded. Yes, I want to spend real time with them. No business calls, no interruptions. Sophia crossed her arms. And if something urgent comes up? It won't. He met her gaze. I promise. She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Fine. But if you break their hearts, Ethan, I swear— I won't, he interrupted. I swear. The first few hours at the cabin were idyllic. They hiked, played board games, and roasted marshmallows by the fire. Ethan, in his meticulously pressed designer jeans, even let the kids bury him in a pile of leaves, an act that earned giggles and shrieks of laughter from Ava. For the first time, he felt like a real father. But fatherhood wasn't just about the easy moments, and he was about to learn that the hard way. That night, a storm rolled in, bringing heavy winds and thunder. The triplets had never been in a cabin before, and the unfamiliar sounds sent them into a panic. Ava was the first to burst into tears. I want to go home. Theo, trying to be brave, clutched his stuffed animal but kept his lips pressed tightly together. Ethan Jr. looked to Ethan for reassurance, and for the first time Ethan realized just how much they relied on him. He swallowed down his own uncertainty and knelt beside them. It's just thunder, guys. Nothing scary, I promise. Ava sniffled. But what if the lights go out? Ethan hesitated, then reached for a flashlight. Then we'll make shadow puppets. Theo blinked. Shadow puppets? Ethan nodded. Yeah, look. He turned on the flashlight and made a rabbit with his hands, casting its shape onto the wall. The triplets stared, momentarily distracted. Theo was the first to giggle. That's not a rabbit, that's a blob. Ethan laughed. Okay, how about this one? He twisted his fingers and a slightly better rabbit took shape. Ava hiccuped but smiled. Ethan Jr. inched closer. By the time the storm passed, all three kids had calmed down. And for the first time, Ethan didn't feel like a billionaire or a businessman. He felt like Dad. When they returned home, Sophia was waiting on the porch, anxiety clear on her face. When the triplets ran up to her, excitedly babbling about their adventures, she looked at Ethan in surprise. They had fun? She asked, still skeptical. Ethan nodded. Yeah, even with the storm. She frowned. They hate storms. They did, Ethan admitted, but we got through it. Sophia studied him, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Maybe you really are changing. Ethan held her gaze. I am, Sophia, and I'm not stopping. She exhaled slowly, glancing at their kids. We'll see. It wasn't trust yet, but it was hope. And for Ethan, that was enough to keep fighting. Ethan had made progress, but he knew deep down that winning Sophia's trust was not just about showing up. It was about proving he had changed in ways that truly mattered. And part of that meant confronting the man he used to be. One evening, as Ethan was leaving the brownstone after spending time with the Triplets, Sophia stopped him at the door. "There's someone you need to see," she said, her voice firm but cautious. Ethan frowned. "Who?" She motioned toward the living room. Seated there, hands folded neatly in his lap, was Senator Hastings, Veronica's father. Ethan's spine stiffened. He hadn't spoken to the man since the wedding disaster. He hadn't needed to. But now, as the older man lifted his sharp, calculating gaze, Ethan realized this was a confrontation he couldn't avoid. The senator stood, extending a hand. "Ethan." Ethan hesitated before shaking it. "Senator," Sophia crossed her arms. "He came here asking for you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Why?" The senator's smile was cool. "Because I wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true, that the great Ethan Caldwell had gone soft." Ethan bristled. "If that's why you're here, you're wasting your time." The senator's gaze flickered toward Sophia, then back to him. "I'm here to remind you that a man in your position can't afford distractions." Sophia scoffed. "Distractions? You mean his children?" The senator ignored her. "Your business, your reputation, those things made you powerful, made you untouchable. And now, you're making headlines for playing house." Ethan's hands curled into fists. He had spent years chasing the very things the senator was referring to: status, power, the illusion of control. But now, standing here in Sophia's home, with his children asleep upstairs, he realized something. That life wasn't enough anymore. "I don't need your advice," Ethan said, his voice steady. "And I don't need your approval." The senator's gaze darkened. "You think this life suits you? Changing diapers? Playing father? Let's see how long that lasts before you come crawling back to what you're good at." Ethan stepped forward, his expression hard. "I was good at it, but it cost me everything that mattered, and I'm not making that mistake again." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in the senator's eyes. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but Ethan cut him off. "You can go now," Ethan said coldly. "I have real priorities." The senator stared at him for a long moment before finally nodding. "I suppose time will tell if you mean that." Without another word, he turned and strode out the door, leaving behind the lingering weight of everything Ethan had once believed in. Ethan exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. He turned to Sophia, expecting her to still be guarded, to still look at him with hesitation. But instead, there was something softer in her gaze, something unreadable. "You really have changed," she murmured. Ethan met her eyes. "I told you I would." She studied him for a moment longer before nodding. Maybe you did." And for the first time since she had walked back into his life, Ethan felt something shift between them. A silent understanding, a quiet possibility. He wasn't just fighting for his children anymore. He was fighting for her. Ethan had faced powerful adversaries before, rival executives, cunning investors, even billion-dollar lawsuits. But nothing felt as significant as the battle he was now fighting for his family. The night after Senator Hastings' visit, Ethan found himself unable to sleep. His penthouse, once his fortress, now felt empty. The silence stretched unbearably, amplifying his thoughts. For years he had believed power and wealth would shield him from regret. But they hadn't. They had only delayed it. In the dim glow of his study lamp, he flipped open an old leather notebook, his first planner from the early days of Caldwell Innovations. Scrawled on the first page was his life's mantra: build, conquer, dominate. Ethan exhaled sharply, grabbing a pen. Beneath those words, he wrote a single addition: or lose everything that matters. It was time for him to decide. Was he the man who let love slip through his fingers, or was he the man who fought for it? The next morning, Ethan arrived at Sophia's brownstone earlier than usual, carrying coffee and a determined expression. Sophia opened the door, raising an eyebrow. "You're early." Ethan nodded, stepping inside. "I need to talk to you." She folded her arms. "That sounds ominous." "It's important," he admitted, his gaze steady. "I want to buy a house." Sophia blinked. "You already own a dozen." "Not for me," he clarified. "For you, for the kids, for us." Silence stretched between them. Sophia's grip on her coffee cup tightened. "Ethan, Before you say no," he cut in. "This isn't about me throwing money at a problem. I know you built a life without me. I respect that. But this brownstone? It's not big enough for 3 growing kids, and I want to give them a home where they have space to play, a backyard where they can run around, a place that belongs to all of us." Sophia exhaled slowly. "You think buying a house makes this real?" Ethan met her gaze. I think fighting for something real makes this real." She shook her head, but he saw the uncertainty in her eyes. "Ethan, I don't want you to fix things with a check." "Then let me fix them by being here," he said softly. "For good." Sophia wrestled with her emotions. He had been proving himself, showing up every day, keeping his promises. And now, standing in front of her, he wasn't just offering them a house. He was offering them a future, a real future. She looked at him, really looked at him. The man before her wasn't the Ethan Caldwell who had once left her behind for ambition. He was someone else now, someone willing to put them first. Her walls had been up for so long that lowering them felt like stepping off a ledge into the unknown. But maybe, just maybe, he was worth the fall. Sophia swallowed hard. "Okay," she whispered. Ethan's breath hitched. "Okay?" She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Let's go look at houses." For the first time in years, hope didn't feel dangerous. It felt like coming home. Ethan stood in the middle of the sprawling backyard, watching as the triplets ran in excited circles, their laughter echoing across the open space. It was a stark contrast from the tight confines of Sophia's brownstone, where they had learned to make do in small corners. Here, they were free. Completely. Undeniably free. Sophia stood beside him, arms crossed, her expression thoughtful as she took it all in. "It's big." He glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "That's kind of the point." They had spent the last few weeks searching for a house, rejecting dozens before finally settling on this one. It wasn't just a mansion with excess rooms. It was warm, filled with light, and had a backyard big enough for every childhood adventure imaginable. "I don't want them to feel like they have to be careful all the time," Ethan said, watching Theo climb onto a wooden swing attached to an old oak tree. "I want them to have space to be kids." Sophia exhaled. "Ethan, this is a big step." "I know," he admitted. "But I'm not going anywhere, Sophia." She turned to him, searching his face for the truth. "And if things don't work out?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "Then I'll still be their father, no matter what." Later that evening, as they walked through the house, Sophia's hesitation lingered. She ran her fingers along the kitchen counter, lost in thought. Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching her. "What's on your mind?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "I'm just scared." He stepped closer. "Of what?" She turned to face him. "That this is temporary. That one day you'll wake up and realize this isn't what you want. Ethan's chest tightened. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. I already realized that once, and it was the worst mistake of my life. Sophia swallowed hard, emotions warring in her eyes. I want to believe that. Then let me prove it to you, he said softly. Not with money, not with grand gestures, just with time. A long silence stretched between them before Sophia finally nodded. Okay. It wasn't an immediate resolution, but it was something. The triplets were ecstatic when Ethan and Sophia finally told them the house was theirs. Ava ran circles around the living room, while Theo claimed one of the bedrooms as his own before they had even moved in. Ethan Jr. smiled up at Ethan, his expression full of something deeper, trust. And for the first time, Ethan felt like he truly belonged. As the sun set behind their new home, Sophia stood beside him, her fingers brushing against his. She didn't pull away this time. Ethan looked down at her, his voice steady. We're going to be okay, Sophia. She exhaled softly, a small smile curving her lips. Yeah, I think we are. For the first time, the future didn't seem uncertain. It felt like home. Moving day was filled with chaos, the good kind. The triplets darted from room to room, shouting claims over their favorite spots in the house, while movers carried boxes and furniture inside. The sun was high, casting golden light through the windows of their new home, a symbol of the fresh start Ethan had fought for. Ethan carried a box labeled Kitchen Essentials inside, only to be intercepted by Ava, who latched onto his leg. Daddy, can we paint our rooms whatever colors we want? He ruffled her curls. The word Daddy still sent a strange warmth through his chest every time they said it. Whatever color you want, Princess. Even pink. Ava gasped dramatically. Even sparkly pink? Ethan glanced at Sophia, who had just entered the room, arching a brow at the conversation. Even sparkly pink, he confirmed with a chuckle. Sophia shook her head in mock horror. You have no idea what you've just agreed to. He grinned. I think I can handle it. As the afternoon wore on, boxes were unpacked, furniture was set up, and soon, the house began to feel like more than just a structure. It became a home. One filled with laughter, love, and second chances. That evening, after the kids had finally collapsed in their new beds, exhausted from all the excitement, Ethan and Sophia stood on the back patio, watching the stars emerge. You did it, Sophia murmured, wrapping her arms around herself. You really made this happen. Ethan turned to her. We made this happen. She hesitated, as if debating whether to say what was on her mind. Finally, she exhaled. Ethan, I don't know how to do this. United States. I've spent so long being just me, just their mom. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Then let's figure it out together. She looked up at him, vulnerability shining in her eyes. And if I get scared again? Ethan lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Then I'll remind you why we're worth the risk. A small smile played on her lips before she whispered, I love you. His heart clenched at the words he had been afraid he would never hear from her again. He cupped her face, brushing his thumb along her cheek. I love you too, Sophia. Always. She leaned into him then, their lips meeting in a kiss filled with all the unspoken emotions they had carried for years. Pain, longing, forgiveness, and most of all, love. When they finally pulled apart, Sophia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This time, she murmured, don't let go. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Never again. The past had tried to break them, but the future was theirs to write. Together.